The stone corridors of Castle echoed with the rhythmic footsteps of Sir Blackwood as he completed his midnight patrol. 23 years of loyal service to the crown had taught him to notice every shadow, every whisper, every unusual sound that might threaten the royal family. Tonight felt different somehow, though he couldn't quite place why. Princess Isabella's chamber lay at the end of the east wing, protected by ancient walls that had withstood countless sieges. As the king's only daughter and heir to the throne, her safety remains primary concern during the dark hours when most of the castle slept. The princess had recently celebrated her 21st birthday, marking her official entry into the complex world of royal politics and marriage negotiations. Paused outside her door, listening carefully. The castle had been unusually active lately with visiting nobles from neighboring kingdoms, all hopping to secure an audience with the princess. Among them was Lord, a charismatic young nobleman from the Northern Territories whose arrival 3 weeks ago had caused quite a stir among the court ladies. Lord possessed everything a suitor might need: wealth, land, political connections, and an undeniably handsome appearance that made servants giggle and whisper in hallways. His dark hair and piercing blue eyes had captured attention from the moment he stepped through the castle gates. More importantly, his family's lands bordered territories that would strengthen the kingdom's northern defenses if united through marriage. The princess had seemed intrigued by Lord during formal dinners and court gatherings, had observed their interactions with the careful eye of someone trained to protect royal interests. Their conversations appeared proper and respectful, though he noticed how the princess's cheeks flushed whenever the young lord spoke directly to her. As continued his rounds, he reflected on the delicate balance of his duties. Protecting the princess meant more than preventing physical harm. It included safeguarding her reputation and ensuring that any romantic entanglements served the kingdom's interests. The king had made it clear that Isabella's eventual marriage would be as much a political alliance as a personal choice. The castle's guest quarters housed several potential suitors, each representing different political advantages. Lord's rooms lay in the South Tower, a respectable distance from the princess's chambers, but close enough to the main halls for convenient social interaction. Had noticed the young nobleman's tendency to linger in common areas where he might encounter the princess during her daily activities. Earlier that evening, a grand feast had celebrated the harvest season. Princess Isabella had worn a stunning emerald gown that complemented her auburn hair and green eyes. She had danced with several nobles, including Lord, whose grace on the dance floor had impressed even the most critical court observers. Their dance had lasted longer than strictly proper, drawing approving nods from some courtiers and worried glances from others. Had positioned himself strategically throughout the evening, watching for any signs of impropriety while remaining unobtrusive. The princess had appeared happy and animated, laughing at Lord's witty remarks and engaging in spirited conversation about literature and music. Their shared interests seemed genuine, not merely the polite exchange expected between potential marriage partners. After the feast, guests had gradually retired to their chambers, had escorted the princess to her room, nodding her unusually bright spirits and the way she hummed softly as they walked through the corridors. She had thanked him warmly for his protection and wished him a peaceful night watch before disappearing behind her heavy wooden door. Now, as midnight approached, continued his vigilant patrol. The castle's ancient stones seemed to hold secrets in their shadows, and every creak or whisper demanded his attention. He took pride in knowing every sound the old building made, from settling timber to mice scurrying behind walls. A soft noise from the direction of the princess's chamber caught his attention. Froze, his hand instinctively moving to his sword hilt. Years of training had taught him to distinguish between innocent nighttime sounds and potential threats. This sound seemed different, more deliberate than the usual settling of old wood and stone. He approached the princess's door with careful, silent steps. The thick oak door muffled most sounds from within, but trained ears could detect unusual activity. His duty required him to investigate anything that might compromise the princess's safety, regardless of how uncomfortable the situation might become. The castle's guest quarters remained quiet, with most visitors presumably asleep after the evening's festivities. Lord's room showed no light beneath the door, and no sounds emerged from within. Had checked the South Tower earlier in his rounds, noting nothing unusual about any of the guest accommodations. As he listened more intently outside the princess's chamber, began to distinguish voices from within. The conversation seemed animated, though he couldn't make out specific words through the heavy door. Protocol demanded that he ensure the princess's safety while respecting her privacy, a balance that required careful judgment and discretion. The princess's reputation meant everything in the complex world of royal politics. Even innocent interactions could be twisted into scandalous rumors if discovered by the wrong people. Understood that his primary responsibility involved protecting not just the princess's physical safety, but also her honor and the stability of the kingdom that depended on her eventual marriage alliance. Something about the rhythm of conversation from within the chamber began to concern. The voices seemed urgent, passionate even, in a way that suggested more than casual late-night discussion. His protective instincts sharpened as he considered the possible implications of what he might be witnessing. Lord's charm and obvious attraction to the princess suddenly took on new significance. Had the young nobleman somehow gained access to the princess's private chambers? The very thought sent alarm bells ringing through his mind. Such a breach of protocol could destroy the princess's reputation and throw the kingdom's carefully planned alliance negotiations into chaos. Weighed his options carefully. Bursting into the princess's chamber without cause could create the very scandal he sought to prevent. However, allowing a potentially compromising situation to continue unchecked could prove equally disastrous. His years of service had prepared him for difficult decisions, but few had carried such far-reaching consequences. The sounds from within grew more distinct, and his concern deepened. He could clearly hear the princess's voice now, though her words remained unclear through the thick door. Something in her tone suggested emotional intensity that went beyond appropriate conversation between a royal and her suitor. His mind raced through the possible explanations and consequences. If Lord had indeed gained unauthorized access to the princess's chamber, immediate action would be necessary to prevent scandal and protect the kingdom's interests. The young nobleman's political connections and family wealth would not protect him from charges of impropriety toward the royal heir. The gravity of the situation settled heavily on his shoulders. Whatever was happening beyond that door would likely change the course of events for the princess, the kingdom, and everyone involved. His next decision would echo through the halls of power for years to come, affecting alliance negotiations, political stability, and the future of the crown itself. As the senior royal guard had sworn an oath to protect the royal family at all costs, that oath now demanded action, regardless of the personal or political consequences that might follow. The time for hesitation had passed. The princess's honor and the kingdom's future hung in the balance, waiting for his decisive intervention. Pressed his ear closer to the heavy oak door, straining to understand the situation developing within the princess's chamber. The voices had grown more animated, and he could now distinguish two distinct speakers engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. His hand remained steady on his sword hilt as he processed the implications of what he was hearing. The princess's voice carried clearly through brief moments of silence, speaking with an urgency that had never heard before. Her words seemed rushed, almost desperate, as if she were pleading or arguing with someone. The second voice, deeper and unmistakably masculine, responded with equal intensity. His worst fears began to crystallize as he recognized the distinctive accent of Lord. How had the northern nobleman gained access to the princess's private chambers? The castle's security protocols were strict, and personally supervised the evening rounds that should have prevented any unauthorized movement through the corridors. Yet somehow, Lord had managed to reach the princess's room without detection, suggesting either exceptional stealth or inside assistance. Considered the various ways such a breach might have occurred. Secret passages existed throughout the ancient castle, though most had been sealed or were known only to long-time residents. Lord's brief tenure as a guest made it unlikely he could have discovered and navigated such hidden routes without help. More troubling was the possibility that someone within the castle had facilitated this clandestine meeting. The conversation inside continued with increasing emotional intensity. Could now hear the princess's voice more clearly, though specific words remained indistinct. Her tone suggested a combination of anger, fear, and something else he couldn't quite identify. Lord's responses came in measured, persuasive tones that reminded of a skilled negotiator attempting to win over a reluctant participant. Suddenly, the princess's voice rose sharply and heard his name called out clearly through the door. She shouted, her voice carrying both command and desperation. The sound pierced through the oak barrier with unmistakable clarity, leaving no doubt about her intent to summon help. Without hesitation, drew his sword and stepped back to shoulder the heavy door. Years of training had prepared him for exactly this moment, when the safety of the royal family required immediate action regardless of protocols or consequences. The princess's call for help overrode all other considerations, transforming what might have been a delicate political situation into a clear matter of royal security. The door burst inward with a tremendous crash as powerful frames struck the aged wood. Splinters flew across the chamber as the lock gave way, and he rolled smoothly through the opening with his blade ready for combat. His eyes quickly scanned the room, taking in details that would determine his next actions. Princess Isabella stood near her four-poster bed, still wearing the emerald gown from the evening's feast, but with her hair disheveled and her face flushed with emotion. Her eyes were wide with what appeared to be a mixture of relief and embarrassment at sudden entrance. She clutched a piece of parchment in her trembling hand, holding it as if it contained something of tremendous importance. Lord stood across the chamber near the tall windows that overlooked the castle gardens. His usually impeccable appearance showed signs of agitation, with his dark hair mussed and his elegant doublet partially unlaced. More significantly, noticed that the young nobleman's hand rested on the hilt of a jeweled dagger at his belt, though he made no move to draw the weapon. The room itself told a story of hasty activity. Furniture had been moved, with chairs positioned as if for a private conference. Candles burned throughout the chamber, providing far more illumination than would be normal for sleeping hours. Most telling were several documents scattered across a small writing desk, their official seals visible even from position near the broken door. "Sir," the princess said, her voice steadying as she composed herself in the presence of her protector. "Thank goodness you came quickly. Lord has presented me with information that threatens the very foundations of our kingdom. I needed to summon you immediately to verify what he has discovered." Kept his sword raised while processing this unexpected explanation. The scene before him differed dramatically from what he had anticipated when he heard the princess call his name. Instead of an improper romantic encounter, he appeared to have interrupted a clandestine political meeting of some significance. Lord slowly removed his hand from his dagger and raised both palms in a gesture of non-aggression. "Sir," he said with careful formality, "I apologize for the irregular circumstances of this meeting. However, the information I carry could not wait for normal diplomatic channels. The princess's life, and indeed the stability of the entire kingdom, may depend on the immediate action we take tonight." His military training demanded that he secure the situation before attempting to understand it fully. "Step away from the window, Lord," he commanded, his sword remaining steady. "Princess, please move closer to me where I can better ensure your protection." As both nobles with his instructions began to piece together the true nature of what he had discovered. The scattered documents on the writing desk bore seals from various kingdoms, suggesting correspondence of significant political importance. The princess's emotional state seemed to stem from shock or fear rather than romantic passion, and Lord's defensive posture indicated concern for his own safety rather than embarrassment at interrupted intimacy. "What information?" asked, maintaining his vigilant stance while addressing the princess. His duty required him to protect her from all threats, including political conspiracies that might endanger her life or throne. Princess Isabella held up the parchment she had been clutching. "Lord intercepted communications between several neighboring kingdoms. They're planning to unite in an attack against our realm, using my upcoming marriage negotiations as a cover for their military preparations. The wedding celebrations they're requesting would provide perfect cover for positioning troops near our borders." The implications of such a revelation struck immediately. If true, this intelligence represented a threat far greater than any improper romantic liaison. An alliance of neighboring kingdoms could overwhelm their defenses, especially if the attack came during a time when the kingdom's guard was lowered for wedding festivities. Lord stepped forward carefully, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "I discovered the plot through contacts in my family's northern territories. My father's trade relationships provided access to information that revealed the true purpose behind the sudden interest in alliance marriages with Princess Isabella. They're not seeking partnership, they're planning conquest." Studied both nobles carefully, his trained eye searching for signs of deception. The princess's evident distress seemed genuine, and Lord's information aligned with suspicious patterns had noticed in recent diplomatic activity. The timing and coordination of various suitors arriving at court had struck him as unusually well orchestrated for independent romantic pursuits. "Show me the documents," commanded, maintaining his protective position while preparing to examine the evidence. The next few minutes would determine whether he had prevented a political disaster or interrupted the exposure of a military conspiracy that threatened the entire kingdom. Princess Isabella moved toward the writing desk, her steps still somewhat unsteady from the evening's revelations. Lord risked his own life to bring this information to me personally. He couldn't trust normal diplomatic channels because we don't know which of our courtiers might be compromised by enemy agents. The gravity of the situation began to settle fully in his mind. If Lord's intelligence proved accurate, the kingdom faced imminent danger from multiple directions. The young nobleman's midnight visit to the princess's chamber, while highly irregular, might have been motivated by genuine loyalty rather than romantic impropriety. Lowered his sword slightly while remaining alert. "How did you gain access to the princess's chamber without triggering security protocols?" Lord glanced toward Princess Isabella before responding. "The princess provided me with knowledge of a servant's passage that connects to this wing of the castle. We agreed that this information was too sensitive to risk exposure through normal channels and too urgent to wait for morning court sessions." The explanation raised new questions about the princess's judgment and the security implications of sharing knowledge about secret passages. However, recognized that desperate situations sometimes required unconventional solutions. His immediate priority remained protecting the princess while determining the truth about these alleged threats to the kingdom. Approached the writing desk cautiously, his experienced eyes scanning the scattered documents while maintaining awareness of both nobles in the chamber. The parchments bore official seals from the kingdoms of and the Crimson Territories, three realms that had historically maintained uneasy truces with Princess Isabella's kingdom. The discovery of coordinated communication between these traditionally separate powers immediately raised serious concerns about their true intentions. The first document examined contained detailed maps of the kingdom's border fortifications, annotated with notes about guard rotations, supply lines, and defensive weaknesses. The information appeared accurate and current, suggesting that enemy agents had been conducting surveillance operations within the kingdom for some time. Such intelligence gathering typically preceded military action, lending credibility to Lord's warnings about an impending attack. Princess Isabella moved to side, her earlier distress replaced by focused determination. "The correspondence reveals that they've been planning this conspiracy for months, using the pretext of marriage negotiations to gather intelligence about our defenses. Every suitor who has visited court may have been conducting espionage rather than genuine courtship." Lord remained near the windows, his posture tense as he watched examine the evidence. "My family's trading connections in the Northern Territories allowed me to intercept these communications, but I fear my investigation may have been discovered. Several of my contacts have disappeared recently, and I suspect enemy agents are aware that their plans have been compromised." Studied a particularly damaging document that detailed the timing and coordination of the planned attack. According to the intercepted correspondence, the three allied kingdoms intended to strike simultaneously during the Harvest Festival celebrations, when the kingdom's forces would be dispersed for ceremonial duties rather than concentrated for defense. The timing showed sophisticated understanding of the kingdom's seasonal military patterns. The implications extended beyond immediate military threats. If multiple kingdoms had been working together to gather intelligence through false diplomatic overtures, it suggested a level of coordination that could reshape the entire regional balance of power. The princess's kingdom found itself surrounded by potential enemies who had been masquerading as allies and suitors. "We must alert my father immediately," Princess Isabella declared, her voice carrying the authority of her royal position. "The king needs to know that our kingdom faces coordinated threats from multiple directions, and that our current defensive preparations are inadequate for the scale of attack being planned." Nodded grimly, recognizing the critical nature of the situation. However, his protective instincts also demanded consideration of immediate security concerns. "Princess, if Lord's investigation has been discovered, this chamber may no longer be safe. We should move to more secure quarters while determining our next actions." Lord stepped forward urgently. There's something else you both need to know. The correspondence suggests that enemy agents have already infiltrated the castle staff. Some of the information in these documents could only have been obtained from sources within the castle itself. We cannot trust normal communication channels or security protocols. The revelation that enemy spies might be operating within the castle walls sent a chill through his professional composure. His entire security framework depended on trust in the castle staff and established protocols for protecting the royal family. If that foundation had been compromised, traditional defensive strategies might prove worse than useless. Princess Isabella gathered the scattered documents with swift efficiency. Then, we must act independently until we can identify and eliminate the security breaches. Lord, your loyalty tonight may have saved the kingdom, but it has also placed you in tremendous danger if enemy agents discover your role in exposing their plans. His military mind began formulating emergency protocols for the unprecedented situation they faced. The princess's safety required immediate relocation to quarters that could be secured without relying on potentially compromised staff. Additionally, they needed to establish secure communication with the king while avoiding channels that might be monitored by enemy agents. There's a secure chamber in the old tower that can be defended with minimal personnel, informed them. We can move there while establishing contact with trusted members of the royal guard. However, we must assume that any unusual activity will be reported to enemy agents, so our movements must appear routine until we reach safety. Lord moved away from the windows as spoke. I've prepared escape routes in case my presence here was discovered. My horse is saddled and waiting in the lower courtyard, and I have supplies cached at strategic points along several possible paths away from the castle. However, I'm reluctant to abandon Princess Isabella when enemy agents may already be moving to eliminate witnesses to their conspiracy. Princess Isabella looked between her protector and the young nobleman who had risked everything to warn her of danger. The weight of leadership settled visibly on her shoulders as she realized that decisions made in the next few hours could determine the fate of everyone in the kingdom. Her voice carried new authority when she spoke. Lord, your information has proven invaluable, but your continued presence here increases the danger for everyone involved. If you can safely reach your northern territories, you may be able to gather additional intelligence about enemy movements and coordinate resistance efforts from there. Appreciated the princess's strategic thinking, though he remained concerned about the immediate security situation. Before anyone leaves the castle, we need to establish secure communication protocols and backup plans. If this conspiracy is as extensive as these documents suggest, we may need to coordinate resistance efforts across multiple fronts. The young nobleman nodded soberly. My family's network of trading contacts extends throughout the region. If I can reach them safely, we may be able to establish communication lines that bypass normal diplomatic channels. However, the journey will be extremely dangerous if enemy agents are already searching for me. Princess Isabella moved decisively toward her wardrobe. Then we must create the impression that tonight's meeting never occurred. Lord, you will leave through the same passage you used to arrive, but instead of returning to your guest quarters, you'll proceed directly to your escape route. And I will remain here long enough to establish alibis for this evening before moving to secure quarters. Admired the princess's quick thinking, though he worried about the risks involved in such an elaborate deception. Princess, if enemy agents discover evidence of Lord's visit here, both your reputation and your life will be in immediate danger. We must be prepared for the possibility that this conspiracy includes plans for your assassination. The sobering reminder of personal danger seemed to strengthen rather than intimidate Princess Isabella. Then, we must ensure that the kingdom's defenses are prepared before enemy agents can act against me personally. The safety of the realm takes precedence over my individual survival, just as my father has always taught me. Lord approached the princess with formal respect, though urgency colored his movements. Your Highness, it has been my honor to serve the crown tonight. If circumstances permit, I hope to see you again under better conditions. Until then, please remember that you have allies beyond these castle walls who will support your fight against this conspiracy. As the three conspirators prepared to part ways, reflected on how completely the night's events had exceeded his expectations. What had begun as a routine security patrol had evolved into exposure of a military conspiracy that threatened the kingdom's very existence. The princess's apparent romantic indiscretion had transformed into evidence of her courage and political acumen under pressure. Princess Isabella clasped Lord's hand briefly in farewell. Your bravery tonight will not be forgotten, regardless of what happens in the days ahead. May fortune favor your journey and bring you safely to allies who can help us defend against the enemies who surround us. Watched the young nobleman disappear through the concealed passage, then began implementing immediate security measures to protect the princess while they developed longer-term defensive strategies. The knight had revealed threats that would challenge everything he understood about protecting the royal family, but it had also demonstrated the princess's readiness to face those challenges with wisdom and courage that would serve the kingdom well in the difficult times ahead. The broken door would require explanation, but felt confident that the truth, properly presented, would vindicate everyone involved in tonight's dangerous but necessary conspiracy to save the kingdom from its enemies.